I booked the Airbnb with my friend because we both needed a quiet weekend away from our routine. We had been talking for weeks about getting out of the city, even if it was only for 2 nights. The listing we chose looked simple but peaceful. A small 2-bedroom cabin beside a large open field, with woods stretching out on the other side. The pictures showed clean rooms, a long porch, and enough distance from the nearest neighbor that we wouldn't hear anything except the wind. We drove out on a Friday afternoon, the sky heavy with low clouds. The farther we got from the city, the more the roads narrowed, and the more empty the land began to look. Farms with wide fields, fences leaning sideways, barns with broken roofs. Then the farms disappeared too, replaced by long stretches of grass and little pockets of trees. When we finally turned onto the dirt road that led to the cabin, the entrance looked almost hidden. Branches from the trees hung low over the road, like the path hadn't been used in weeks. As we drove in, the road felt uneven under the tires, and dust rose behind us like a trail. The cabin came into view after a few minutes. It sat in a small clearing with the wide field in front of it and thick woods behind it. The porch wrapped around one side, and the windows reflected the gray sky. It looked quiet in a way that felt peaceful at first, almost calming. Inside, everything looked simple but clean. 2 bedrooms, a small kitchen, a living room with an old couch, and a door that led out to the back porch overlooking the woods. My friend took the room on the left, and I took the one on the right. Both windows faced the field. We unpacked and settled in. The first evening felt normal. We made food, walked around the yard, and watched the sun set behind the line of trees far across the field. When the sky finally turned dark, the entire area looked swallowed by shadows. The nearest house wasn't visible from where we were. No streetlights, no passing cars, nothing. I didn't realize how dark true darkness could be until I stepped outside to throw out some trash. The cabin lights didn't reach very far, and everything outside the small circle of light looked like a wall of black. We stayed up for a while, then both went to our rooms. I lay in bed, listening to the old cabin settle and the wind push against the windows. I wasn't scared at first. I was used to quiet places, but it was the kind of quiet that felt too complete, like something was missing. There were no insects, no owls, no distant engines, just silence. I finally drifted off sometime after midnight. I woke up to a soft rhythmic sound. It wasn't loud, but it was steady. At first, I thought it was the old refrigerator, but after listening harder, I realized it was coming from outside my window, a slow crunching sound, like footsteps in the dry grass. My heart thudded in my chest. I lifted my head slightly, careful not to move the blankets too much. The footsteps were slow, almost measured, like someone was walking toward the side of the cabin with careful steps. I stared at the window, waiting for a shadow to pass by or some sign of movement. The curtains were thin, letting a faint slice of moonlight in. Nothing moved, but I could hear the steps clearly now. They stopped directly in front of my window. I held my breath. The stillness felt thick and unreal. I waited for the sound to continue, but whoever or whatever had been walking seemed to be standing still now. I imagined someone quietly listening through the wall, trying to hear if anyone inside was awake. My chest felt tight. I didn't move until the footsteps finally started again, slow and dragging, like the person was walking along the side of the cabin toward the back porch. When the sound faded completely, I stayed awake for nearly an hour, just listening to the silence. Eventually, exhaustion caught up to me, and I slept again. In the morning, I found faint footprints in the dew on the grass near my window. They were the size of an adult boot, not an animal. The prints were spaced out in a slow, careful pattern. They led from the direction of the woods, stopped right below my window, and then continued toward the back of the cabin. I didn't tell my friend. I didn't want to scare them or ruin the trip. I convinced myself it was probably someone from a nearby house who walked around the area at night. The cabin was isolated enough that maybe people took shortcuts across the field. The day went normally. We walked around the clearing, took pictures, explored the edge of the woods but didn't go deep, and sat on the porch for a while. But even during the day, something felt off. The woods felt too quiet. The air felt heavy, The back porch seemed colder than the rest of the cabin for no reason. Small things, but steady enough to keep me uneasy. That night, clouds covered the moon completely. The cabin interior felt darker, almost claustrophobic. We played a few games and stayed up a bit later this time. When we finally got ready for bed, I tried to shake the feeling from the previous night, telling myself it was probably nothing. I lay down and forced myself to stay calm. I kept listening, waiting for the footsteps again. Minutes felt like hours, and then it started. A single crack from outside. Not loud, just sharp enough to break the silence. Then another, twigs snapping slowly, like someone stepping carefully but still hitting small branches. This time, the footsteps were coming from the field side. They were closer than the night before. I felt fear crawl slowly up my spine. I lay completely still, staring at the dark ceiling, listening to the slow approach. The steps stopped again right outside my window. I could hear breathing, slow, steady breaths from someone standing on the other side of the thin wall. I didn't dare move. After a long moment, the steps shifted. The person was turning slightly, maybe looking toward the front of the cabin now. Then the footsteps began again, moving toward the porch. Something inside me told me to check on my friend. I got out of bed quietly, my legs shaky. I eased my door open and stepped into the hallway. The house was almost pitch black except for the faint light under the living room curtain. My friend's bedroom door was open a crack. I nudged it wider and looked inside. The room was empty. The bed was neatly made. My friend wasn't there. My stomach dropped so fast it made me dizzy. My friend's shoes were gone too. Their jacket was missing from the hook by the door. I checked the bathroom and the kitchen. Nothing. I walked to the front window and carefully lifted the edge of the curtain. The yard was empty. No sign of them. No sign of anyone. That was when I noticed something else. Fresh footprints in the dirt. 2 sets. One leading toward the trail at the edge of the field. One coming back. I stood there, frozen, trying to piece things together. My friend must have gone outside sometime after I fell asleep. Maybe they heard something too. Maybe they went to look. But the thought of them walking into that darkness alone made my chest tighten. I grabbed my phone, but there was no signal. Not even a single bar. I looked back at the 2 sets of footprints. The ones coming back were deeper, like the person was walking faster, or like they were carrying something. A sickening thought entered my mind. I followed the prints with my eyes and realized they didn't come all the way to the front door. They stopped at the porch steps. From there, a single set of prints, heavy, spaced-out steps, led around the cabin toward the back porch. The same steps I had been hearing. My friend didn't come back inside. Someone else did. I didn't stay another minute. I grabbed my bag with shaking hands, got in the car, and drove straight down the dirt road, barely able to see through the panic. I didn't look back at the cabin. I didn't stop driving until I reached a main road with a signal on my phone. I tried calling my friend. No answer. I tried again. Still nothing. I called the local police and reported everything. The footprints, the noises, the missing friend. They took the report and said they would send someone to the property. Hours later, they called back. They found no sign of my friend on the property. No sign of a struggle, no sign of anyone else being there. Just footprints around the cabin and more footprints leading into the woods. Footprints that didn't match my shoes or the shoes in the cabin. My friend never came back. Their phone was never turned on again. Their bag was never found. I don't know if they walked into the darkness willingly or if someone else led them there. What I do know is that someone walked around that cabin every night. Someone stood at our windows listening. Someone walked the property in slow, patient steps. And on the second night, my friend went outside. They didn't return. Nothing supernatural. Nothing impossible. Just a real person, hiding in the darkness, waiting for the right moment. And they took it. I had been working non-stop for months and finally convinced myself to book a small Airbnb for a long weekend alone. The listing was a rustic cabin near the edge of a national forest, about a 2-hour drive from the city. The photos showed a wooden exterior, a small deck overlooking a clearing, and a neat little interior with a fireplace and a loft bedroom. The host promised quiet, privacy, and a spot where I could just get away from everything. The drive there was uneventful but long. The main road ended abruptly, and from there, it was a narrow dirt track that wound through dense trees. The GPS signal wavered in patches, and every time the road bent sharply, the canopy above seemed to swallow the sky completely. By the time I reached the clearing where the cabin was supposed to be, the sun was low, turning the horizon a dull orange. When I pulled into the gravel driveway, the cabin was smaller than I expected. It was neat, with a few rocking chairs on the porch and a small pile of firewood stacked to the side. There was no neighbor in sight. The nearest house, if there even was one nearby, was at least half a mile away. The isolation was both peaceful and slightly unnerving. I got out of the car, stretched, and brought my bags inside. The interior smelled faintly of wood polish and smoke, like the previous guests had lit a fire but left in a hurry. I took a tour. A small living area with a couch and a TV, a tiny kitchen with a stove and sink, a bathroom with a shower, and a ladder leading up to the loft bedroom. The loft had 2 small windows that faced the forest behind the cabin. I chose that spot for sleeping, thinking it would give me a better view of the surroundings. The first day passed without incident. I unpacked, made a simple dinner, and sat on the porch watching the forest darken as the sun set. The only sounds were the occasional bird and the rustle of leaves in the wind. It felt serene, the kind of quiet that makes you feel disconnected from the world. I reminded myself to enjoy it because I didn't know when I'd have another weekend like this. That night, around 11 p.m., I started hearing it. At first, I thought it was the wind against the cabin or an animal moving in the underbrush. But the sound was too deliberate, the soft crunch of footsteps on the gravel outside. I froze in the loft, my heart starting to race. The cabin was supposed to be completely isolated. No one was expected, no one was supposed to pass by. I crept to the edge of the loft and looked out the small window. The porch was dark, the deck barely visible under the moonlight, but I could see the faint outline of someone walking along the gravel path toward the front of the cabin. The person was moving slowly, as if trying not to be noticed. I ducked away from the window, my mind racing. I didn't want to panic, but I had no idea what to do. I didn't have a weapon, and my phone barely had signal. I considered calling the host, but even if I could get through, they would be at least an hour away. I stayed still for what felt like minutes, listening. The footsteps stopped at the edge of the porch. I could hear a faint scraping sound, like someone leaning against the railing. Then, after a long pause, the person moved again, walking toward the side of the cabin. Every step was deliberate, slow, patient. I lay down on the floor of the loft, trying not to breathe too loudly, imagining the person circling the cabin, inspecting it, waiting. I stayed like that for over an hour, until the footsteps finally faded back down the dirt track toward the trees. My pulse was still racing when I finally allowed myself to move. The next morning, I went outside and saw clear footprints in the gravel and dirt around the porch. They were heavy, adult-sized boots, not animal tracks. They came from the trees, stopped at the porch, and then returned the way they had come. I took pictures on my phone just in case. I didn't tell the host yet. I wanted to be sure I wasn't overreacting. The day passed quietly. I tried to occupy myself with hiking, reading, and cooking, but every shadow, every sound of rustling leaves, made my stomach knot. By evening, the sun was low again, and I felt the same tightness in my chest I had felt the night before. At around 10:30 p.m., I heard it again. Footsteps, on the gravel. Slow, careful, deliberate. This time, they were accompanied by a low, metallic scraping, like someone was dragging a tool or a metal object along the ground. I could hear it even over the wind, and it made my stomach drop. I grabbed a flashlight and crept to the living room window, trying to see outside without being seen. My heart sank when I saw a figure standing near the edge of the porch, just barely visible in the moonlight. They weren't doing anything, just standing there, watching. I couldn't see their face, but the way they held themselves felt tense, purposeful. I considered calling the police, but I remembered I had almost no signal. My only chance was to wait until they moved or left. I kept the flashlight in my hand and stayed at the window, watching them pace slowly along the edge of the cabin. Every now and then, they would stop, turn slightly, and peer toward the loft windows. I couldn't see their eyes, but I knew they were looking right at me. Hours passed. The person didn't leave until just before dawn, slowly walking back toward the trees. When I finally allowed myself to breathe, I felt drained. Sleep was impossible. I didn't close my eyes until the sun was fully up. In the morning, I packed quickly. I didn't eat. I didn't even turn on the stove. I made sure to lock every door and window, grabbed my keys, and got in my car. On the way out, I looked back at the cabin. Nothing moved. The porch was empty. The forest looked normal. When I finally reached the main road and had cell signal again, I called the police. I reported everything. The footprints, the figure, the nights I spent trapped in the loft. They said they would send someone to check the area. Later that day, I spoke with the host. They insisted nobody should have been on the property. No maintenance, no local neighbors, no one else had access. I didn't return to the cabin. I never wanted to. I don't know if the person I saw that night had been watching the property for weeks, or if they had just wandered into the area, but I do know this. The sense of being observed, of having someone circle the cabin and know I was alone, stayed with me long after I left. I learned that isolation can be terrifying in ways you never expect. Not because of ghosts or myths, but because of real people who can quietly watch, plan, and approach without anyone noticing. The cabin looked harmless. The surrounding woods looked peaceful, but someone had been there when they shouldn't have, and the memory of those slow, deliberate steps is something I carry with me every time I consider being alone somewhere remote. Even now, I can picture the way the porch boards creaked under the figure's weight, the way they paused at the window as if testing whether I was awake, the slow rhythm of their approach and retreat. It was a reminder that the world can be far more frightening when it's real, not imagined. I never stayed at another isolated Airbnb after that. I stick to places with neighbors close by, streets I can see, and doors I can lock without worrying someone might be outside. I still travel, still go on weekends away, but I check and double check, and I never forget how real fear can feel when someone knows exactly where you are, and there's nothing you can do to stop them. I was around 14 or 15 when this happened, still at that age where I thought nothing bad could ever really happen to me as long as I was with a friend and holding a flashlight. My family used to camp at the same state park every summer. It wasn't anything special, just a mix of pine woods, dirt trails, an old lake, and a campground that always smelled like smoke and bug spray. But back then it felt like the whole world. Every night after dinner, after the adults got lost in their own conversations, my friend and I would leave the campground and disappear into the trees. We called it the ritual. It made us feel older than we were, like we had some private adventure that only we understood. We didn't do anything exciting. Mostly we'd walk, kicking through dry leaves, shining our small flashlights up at the branches, trying to see if we could find owls or raccoons. Some nights we'd turn off the flashlights and try to move through the dark without tripping. It made us feel brave. The woods were different with the lights off. Every sound became sharp. Every shadow looked thicker. But we kept doing it night after night until it felt normal. Most nights we stayed close to the campground, maybe a 5-minute walk in. We could still see the glow of campfires through the trees, and the distant hum of people talking made the woods feel safer. But that night we decided to go deeper. I don't know why. Maybe we were bored. Maybe we were trying to prove something to ourselves. The woods felt extra quiet that night, and the air had that cold bite that settles in after the sun drops. The kind of air that makes you hear your own breathing. We walked farther than we ever had before. The trees grew taller and the ground got more uneven, filled with roots and little dips that made us watch where we stepped. We were far enough in that the campground noise had completely disappeared. No more fire crackling, no laughter from other campsites, no clanking of pots or someone dragging a folding chair. It was just the woods and our footsteps. Eventually, like we usually did, we turned off our flashlights to see how long we could last. When the darkness closed around us, it felt thicker than usual, almost like it pressed on my shoulders. I remember blinking a few times just to adjust, but the woods were pitch black. The only light came from the faint outline of the sky through the branches. We walked slow, feeling for the ground before each step. I kept one hand out in front of me, just in case. We were maybe half a mile from the nearest campsite when I heard it. Soft whispering, not words I could understand, not even loud enough to guess the tone. Just a faint, breathy noise behind us, like someone trying to speak but holding their voice back. At first I told myself it was wind through the trees, or maybe a deer moving through leaves. But the more I listened, the more it sounded like something trying to form words. My chest tightened and all the small hairs on my arms stood up. Instinct kicked in. I switched on my flashlight and spun around so fast I almost slipped on a root. My friend did the same. Our lights cut through the darkness, slicing between the trees, hitting trunks, ferns, and uneven ground. But nothing moved. Nothing looked out of place. I told myself I probably imagined it. The woods could play tricks on you when you took away your sight. We kept walking a little faster this time, and the idea of turning the flashlights off again was gone. Neither of us said it, but we both felt it. Then we heard it again. This time it was slightly louder. Still soft, still whisper-like, but clearer. We stopped dead in our tracks. I felt frozen in place, every part of me alert. I scanned the darkness behind us with my light, slower this time, making sure I covered every inch. My friend did the same. I didn't see anything, but I had that heavy feeling you get when someone is watching you. That pressure in the back of your neck that makes you want to turn around over and over again. We finally decided to head back. The woods didn't feel fun anymore. They didn't even feel like the same woods we had walked through 100 times. They felt tight and wrong, like something cold had started moving between the trees. As we turned to leave, something caught my eye. A shape on the ground maybe 20 yards away. At first I thought it was an animal because it was low and hunched. But the longer I stared, the more it looked like a person. My chest felt like it dropped into my stomach. It was a woman, crawling. She was moving slowly, dragging herself across the ground, her clothes dark and covered in dirt. I couldn't see her face at first, just the outline of her body and the way her arms pulled her forward. The whispering sound was coming from her, but it didn't sound like words. It sounded like thoughts leaking out of someone who wasn't fully aware of what they were doing. I felt frozen. My brain couldn't make sense of the image in front of me. Nothing in the woods should crawl toward two teenagers in the dark. Nothing should whisper like that. For a moment, I thought maybe she was hurt, or maybe she was dangerous, or maybe both. Then she lifted her head. Her face was smeared with dirt, streaked across her cheeks and forehead. Her hair looked tangled like she had been rolling on the ground. Her eyes were wide, unfocused, like she was trying to find something but couldn't lock onto anything. Standing there in the woods with my flashlight beam shaking over her face, I felt more scared than I ever had in my life. Something about the way she moved didn't seem right. Something about the way she stared made the whole forest feel wrong. She slowly pushed herself to her feet. I could see her legs wobbling like she had been crawling a long time. She kept whispering, but it still didn't make sense. It was just broken sounds. She looked like someone who had been wandering the woods for hours without knowing where she was. She wasn't threatening. She wasn't angry, but there was something deeply unsettling about the whole moment. Seeing someone like that, alone, dirty, crawling toward us in the dark woods, whispering to herself, it felt like a scene from a nightmare, but it was real. We ended up guiding her back toward the campground. She couldn't walk straight, and she moved like every step confused her. The whole way back I kept looking around, checking the trees, checking the shadows, half expecting something else to appear. But it was just us, the woman, and the dark. As we got closer to the lights of the campground, the woods slowly started feeling normal again. The trees didn't seem as tight. The air didn't feel as heavy. The whispering stopped. She walked a bit steadier, like the sight of nearby campsites gave her something to focus on. When we reached the campground area, we tried to help her find her group. Took a while. Most of the campsites were quiet, and people were already inside their tents or around dim fire pits. We kept walking with her until we finally found a group of people who recognized her. They hadn't even noticed she was missing. She had just tried to find a bathroom and wandered into the woods in the wrong direction. She was extremely drunk, maybe high too, and had ended up deeper in the forest than she realized. The relief I felt when her group came over to get her was something I can still remember in my chest. She wasn't dangerous. She wasn't some creature or anything like that. She was just a person who got lost in a place that becomes terrifying the moment you lose control of your surroundings. That night changed how I looked at the woods. Before that, they were just a dark place we walked through for fun. After that, I understood how quickly things could go wrong. How easy it is to get turned around, to panic, to lose your sense of direction. And how sometimes the scariest things in the woods aren't animals or shadows or strange noises. Sometimes it's just another human being who wandered too far and lost themselves in the dark. Looking back now, I realize how lucky she was. If we hadn't walked that far into the woods that night, she would have stayed there crawling and whispering for who knows how long. The temperature dropped that night. She wasn't dressed for the cold. She wasn't thinking clearly. She could have ended up miles away from any trail, deeper and deeper into the forest, until morning came and nobody knew where to even start looking. The thing that still sits with me is how quiet everything was before we heard her. No crunching leaves, no branches breaking, no breathing, just that soft whispering out of nowhere in the middle of a huge dark forest. Sometimes I think about how long she had been out there, how many times she might have crawled close to a trail, whispering to herself, hoping someone would hear her. Even now, years later, whenever I camp, I never walk the woods in the dark without a light on. The darkness isn't a game anymore. That night taught me that you never really know who else might be out there, stumbling around, lost, scared, whispering things you can't quite understand until your flashlight finally lands on them. And sometimes the fear you feel doesn't come from danger. It comes from the realization that the only thing separating safety and disaster is a few wrong steps in the dark. I booked that cabin because I thought a week of quiet would help me reset. I'd been burned out for months, and I needed somewhere away from everything. Away from traffic, neighbors, city noise, all of it. The listing photos showed a small wooden cabin sitting in the middle of tall trees, with a dirt road leading to it and nothing else around. The host said the closest house was a quarter-mile away. At the time, that sounded perfect. When I arrived, the place looked exactly like the pictures. A small single-story cabin with a porch, one bedroom, a compact kitchen, and a living area with an old couch facing a tiny fireplace. The trees around it were tall enough to block most of the sky. It felt calm the moment I stepped out of my car. The only sounds were wind and a few birds. No engines, no voices, nothing man-made except my own tires crunching the dirt. Inside, the place smelled like pine and dust. Simple but clean. I unpacked slowly, enjoying the silence. For the first 2 days, I barely used my phone. I took long walks along the dirt road. I cooked simple meals. I sat on the porch and listened to the woods settling as the temperature dropped each evening. It was exactly what I thought I needed. On the third night, something changed. It was already dark when I finished washing my dishes. I remember that quiet hum in the cabin, the kind that only exists when the world outside is completely still. I walked over to the small kitchen window, mostly out of habit, just to look outside for a moment. I didn't expect to see anything. Maybe a hint of moonlight on the trees or the faint outline of my car parked under the pines. But instead, I saw headlights. 2 bright white beams cutting through the trees, moving slowly, almost uncertainly, like the driver wasn't familiar with the road. I froze for a second. The road was private. The host had said only he used it and he lived miles away. No one else should have been on it. My first instinct was to turn off the kitchen light so I wouldn't be visible from outside. I reached for the switch without looking away from the window. The cabin went dark except for the small orange glow from the fireplace. I ducked slightly, not wanting to be a silhouette. The headlights kept coming, weaving through the trees until they faced directly toward the cabin. The car pulled up and stopped right in front, barely 10 feet from the porch stairs. The beams were bright enough that they lit up the entire front of the cabin, even through the curtains. I could see dust floating in the air outside, lit up by the glare like snow. The engine stayed on. The headlights stayed on. But no one got out. I waited. I didn't breathe for a moment. I wanted to convince myself it was someone lost, someone who took a wrong turn on some back road. But this wasn't the kind of place you just stumbled onto. The road didn't connect to anything else. You had to drive directly toward the cabin on purpose. 5 minutes passed, then 10. The engine hummed at a steady, low sound. The car didn't move at all. It just sat there, pointed straight at the front door like the driver was staring at it and thinking. That thought made the air in the cabin feel tight, like there wasn't enough oxygen. I tried to look for movement through the windshield, but the headlights were too bright. From my angle, the inside of the car looked like a black void behind two blinding circles of white light. I couldn't see if there was one person in there or more. I couldn't see the shape of a head or even the outline of hands on a steering wheel. Then the engine revved, not loud, just a small push on the gas, like someone was making a decision. My body went cold. I didn't know whether to hide in the bedroom, stay near a window, grab something to defend myself, or run into the woods. None of the options felt safe. Another long minute passed. Then, without warning, the headlights turned off. The engine stayed running. As soon as the beams died, the darkness outside swallowed everything. The sudden shift from blinding white to pitch black made me feel like someone had covered all the windows with a blanket. I couldn't see the car anymore. I couldn't even see the outline of the hood. It felt like the whole front of the cabin had disappeared. I stayed absolutely still, listening. The engine kept rumbling, steady and low. I tried to see if there was any glow from the dashboard, but I couldn't make out anything through the blackness. My eyes kept searching for the shape of the car, but it blended with the dark like it had been absorbed into the woods. Another minute passed. Then the car reversed. No headlights, no brake lights, nothing. It rolled backward down the dirt road like the driver knew exactly where to go even without light. I could hear the crunch of tires moving over gravel. Slow, controlled, careful. Not a panicked reversal, not someone scared they were in the wrong place. More like someone who didn't want to be seen leaving. Eventually the sound faded into the distance. Then it was gone. I stayed awake the entire night after that. I didn't turn on a single light except the fireplace because I was afraid the glow would make me visible from outside. Every so often I stood at the window and listened. I couldn't hear anything except the wind rubbing through the trees. But the feeling that someone had been watching the cabin stayed with me, thick and heavy in my chest. I checked the dirt road more times than I can count. Every time I expected to see those headlights creeping back through the trees or hear the sound of tires on gravel. But there was nothing. The night stretched on forever. Every sound, the creak of the floor, the faint movement of branches, even my own breathing, felt too loud. When the sky finally turned a faint gray, I grabbed my bag and packed everything with shaking hands. I didn't eat breakfast. I didn't look around the cabin one last time. I just wanted to get out before anything else happened. I loaded my car fast and kept looking over my shoulder at the trees, expecting the same headlights to appear at any second. The woods felt different now, like they were hiding someone. When I backed onto the dirt road, my heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. I didn't relax until I reached the nearest paved street. When I finally got a signal, I messaged the host. I didn't want to sound dramatic, so I just said a car had stopped outside the cabin at night and asked if anyone else used the property. The host replied that no one should have been out there. The road was private, and the nearest house was owned by an elderly couple who didn't drive after dark. He said he had no idea who would be on that road. That made everything worse. Someone had driven down a private road, parked directly in front of a cabin they shouldn't have known was occupied, stared at it for more than 10 minutes, turned off their lights but kept the engine running, and then backed out without making a single visible movement. I didn't reply. I didn't want to say anything else. I didn't want him calling anyone or asking around town. I just left the experience alone. Even now, every time I think about that night, the part that bothers me the most isn't the headlights. It's the moment they turned off and the engine stayed on. That silent, invisible stare. That decision to stay parked there in total darkness, only a few feet away from where I stood frozen inside the cabin. Whoever it was didn't come out to ask for help. They didn't knock. They didn't seem lost. They didn't get out of the car at all. They just watched. And the worst part is knowing that if I hadn't gone to the kitchen at that exact moment, I wouldn't have seen them coming. I would have been asleep. I would have had no idea a car was sitting outside with the lights off, engine rumbling, only a few feet from the front door. I still think about how long they would have stayed if I hadn't noticed them, how long they planned to sit there, what they were waiting for, and what would have happened if they decided to step out of the car. That's the part that still keeps me awake sometimes. I booked that Airbnb because it was cheap and close to where I needed to be. It was one of those shared homestays where you only get a private room and everything else belongs to the host. I usually avoided places like that, but every nearby hotel was either sold out or too expensive. The photos online showed a clean house, bright rooms, and a smiling host who wrote long paragraphs about how he enjoyed meeting new people. At the time, it didn't feel like a red flag. It felt more like someone trying to look welcoming to get good reviews. When I arrived, the house looked normal enough. It was in a quiet residential neighborhood, with trimmed bushes and a small porch with a cracked plant pot. The host opened the door before I even reached it, like he had been standing just behind it, listening. He had this wide, fixed smile that didn't reach his eyes. He nodded at me in a way that made me feel like he already knew what I looked like, even though I hadn't posted a profile picture. I tried to ignore that strange feeling because the last thing I wanted was to be suspicious for no reason. I was tired, stressed, and I just wanted a place to sleep. Inside, the house felt clean but strangely empty. There were no family photos, no decorations, no signs that anyone actually lived there. It was like a rental property designed to look like a home, but not lived in like one. The air felt heavy, like there wasn't enough circulation, and the lights felt a little too dim. My room was small but neat. A bed, a dresser, a tiny desk, and a window that faced the neighbor's fence. Nothing strange there, but what stood out was how quiet the house was. It wasn't the normal kind of quiet you get late at night. It was the type that made it hard to tell if anyone else was even breathing. I unpacked a few things and sat on the bed. The mattress felt old, the springs uneven. I could hear faint creaking somewhere in the house, like slow footsteps on old wood. I figured the host was walking around. Houses make sounds. I tried not to overthink it. Later that night, I stepped out of my room to brush my teeth. I didn't hear anything before I opened the door, but as soon as I stepped into the hallway, he was already there. He wasn't walking toward me. He wasn't doing anything. He was just standing near the wall, facing my direction, like he had been standing there for a long time. His posture was stiff, his hands resting straight at his sides. He didn't say anything, and I didn't say anything either. It felt like he had been expecting me to come out at that exact moment. I brushed my teeth as fast as I could and went back into my room. I didn't know what to think. I told myself I was exhausted and imagining things, but the feeling didn't go away. I changed into my night clothes and lay in bed. I heard slow, soft steps outside my door around midnight. They moved up and down the hallway in a pattern that didn't sound like someone doing anything specific. It was like someone pacing with no purpose, back and forth, always staying near my room. I tried to sleep, but every time I drifted off, a sound pulled me back awake. A creak on the stairs, a soft thud against a wall, or the faint sound of breathing just far enough away that I couldn't tell if it was real. I kept checking the time. Midnight passed. 1 a.m. passed. 2 a.m. came and went. The house stayed dark and completely silent except for those slow movements outside my room. Around 3 in the morning, my throat felt dry. I needed water badly. I hoped the host was asleep by then because that would have made everything feel normal again. I stepped out of my room quietly. The hallway was dim, lit only by a faint glow from the living room. As soon as I reached the bottom of the stairs that led to the kitchen, I froze. He was standing at the sink, not washing anything, not moving, just standing in the dark, facing the counter, his shoulders slightly raised like he had been there for a long time. The way he stood made it look like he wasn't actually doing anything. He wasn't even pretending. It almost felt like he was listening to something, not with his ears, but with his whole body. I walked slowly, trying not to make noise. The air in the kitchen felt heavy and cold, like someone had just opened a door and let night air seep in. I filled my glass as quietly as possible. I could feel him behind me, even though he wasn't moving. His presence felt like a weight on the room. I didn't look at him. I didn't want to. I went back to my room and locked the door. I wasn't sure if the lock was strong, so I pushed the small wooden chair under the handle. I could feel my heartbeat in my neck. I lay in bed, wide awake, trying to listen through the silence. Then the footsteps started. They weren't fast. They weren't loud. They were slow, steady, and patient. They moved from the living room to the hallway, then stopped right outside my door. I stared at the doorknob, waiting for it to move. Didn't, but the footsteps stayed there. I could hear a faint, careful weight shifting back and forth, as if he was standing just inches away from the door, listening to me breathe. Minutes passed. I didn't move. I didn't even blink. The sound remained steady. Slight shifts, like someone adjusting their balance while trying not to be noticed. Sometimes the steps moved away a little, then came back again. At one point, I heard the faint sound of a hand brushing against the wall outside my room. Not scratching, not tapping, just a gentle drag, like fingertips sliding slowly along the paint. I stayed awake the entire night. My body felt stiff from fear, like my muscles were locked. I watched the first light of morning touch the wall near my bed. The footsteps stopped around dawn, as if he finally went to his own room, if he even had one. As soon as the sun was up enough for me to feel safe, I packed my things. I did it quietly but fast, stuffing everything into my bag without folding. I didn't bother brushing my teeth or washing my face. I just wanted to get out. The house felt too silent, too still, like anyone inside could hear the smallest sound. I opened my door slowly. The hallway was empty. The air smelled stale, like someone had been awake all night breathing heavily behind a closed door. I walked down the stairs, trying not to look around too much. I didn't want any surprises. When I reached the front door, I felt a pull in my stomach. That instinct that tells you to run because something is still watching. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me as softly as I could. I didn't want to alert him. I didn't want him to come out. I didn't even want him to know I was leaving early. I walked quickly to my car, unlocked it, and got inside. My hands were shaking. As I reversed out of the driveway, I glanced at the house out of habit. He was standing in the upstairs window. He wasn't waving. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't even blinking. He was just watching me, his face completely blank. It looked like he expected me to come back inside, like it didn't make sense to him that I was leaving. His eyes followed my car until I turned the corner. Even after he disappeared from view, I felt his stare on me. I drove straight to a diner and sat in the parking lot for almost an hour before I calmed down enough to think clearly. When Airbnb asked about my early checkout, I wrote the safest thing I could think of, that the place didn't feel right. I didn't mention the footsteps. I didn't mention the way he stood in the kitchen at 3 a.m. I didn't mention how he watched me leave like he was waiting for me to return. I didn't want trouble, and I didn't want him to come after me if he somehow learned what I said. I've stayed in many places since then, but none of them have ever felt as unsettling as that house. Sometimes when I can't sleep, I think about the way he stood outside my room, listening. I think about how he never seemed to sleep. And the thing that still unsettles me the most isn't anything he did. It's the feeling that he had been doing the same thing to every guest who stayed there. And maybe some of them didn't leave as early as I did. I booked that Airbnb because I needed something cheap and close to the job site I was assigned to for the week. All the hotels nearby were either full or way out of my budget, so a shared homestay seemed like the only option. I usually avoided places where the host lived under the same roof, but the reviews looked decent, and the listing said I'd have a private room with full access to shared areas. At the time, it didn't feel like a big deal. I thought I'd just sleep, work, and leave. When I arrived, the house looked normal from the outside. It sat on a quiet street with narrow sidewalks and tall trees leaning over the roofs. The grass was cut short. The windows were clean. From a distance, nothing looked strange. But as I walked toward the porch, I got a small, uneasy feeling, like something inside the house wasn't matching how neat the outside looked. I ignored it because long drives always messed with my nerves. The host answered the door almost immediately. It was like he had been standing just behind it, waiting for the sound of footsteps. He greeted me with this wide smile, too wide, the kind that looks pasted onto someone's face rather than natural. He nodded a lot and moved his hands too much, like he was trying to make me comfortable but didn't know how to dial himself down. I kept my distance and stepped inside. The house was clean but strangely empty. The walls were bare, with no paintings or photos. The furniture looked mismatched, like things collected over time from random places. The air smelled a little stale, like no windows had been opened in weeks. The lighting felt dim in a way I couldn't explain. Not warm, not cozy, just dull. It was the kind of dimness that made corners look deeper than they should. He led me to my room, which was simple but okay. A bed pushed against the wall, a small dresser, a folding desk, and a single window covered with blinds that looked like they hadn't been pulled open in years. I put my bag down and looked around. There wasn't anything obviously wrong, but the room felt like someone had lived in it before and left in a hurry without taking much with them. The air felt heavy, like something stale was trapped inside. I tried to settle in. I sent a few texts, checked my schedule for the next morning, and lay on the bed for a moment. That's when I first heard it. Slow footsteps somewhere in the hallway. They didn't sound like someone walking normally. They sounded like someone was standing still most of the time, taking one step after long pauses. I thought he was probably checking something around the house or doing chores, but the way the steps lingered made it feel like he was listening instead of moving. After a bit, I went out to use the bathroom and wash up. The moment I opened my door, he was already standing in the hallway. He wasn't walking or turning a corner. He was just standing there like he had been frozen in place. His eyes were open a little too wide, and he didn't look tired at all. I nodded at him and kept moving, trying not to overthink it. Maybe he had insomnia. Maybe he was just restless. People had their quirks. But every single time I stepped out of my room, no matter how random the moment, he was there. Standing in the hallway, standing at the bottom of the stairs, standing in the kitchen doorway, always already in position like he knew exactly when I would appear. He never acted surprised. He never hurried. Felt like he was always waiting. That night, after brushing my teeth, I went back to my room and tried to relax. I listened to a podcast, scrolled through my phone, and tried to keep my mind busy. But even with my headphones in, I could feel the air shift in the hallway outside. The boards creaked every so often. My heart kept picking up speed for no real reason. Around 3 in the morning, I got thirsty. I waited a few minutes before opening the door because I didn't want to run into him again. But eventually, I had to go. I stepped out as quietly as I could, hoping the darkness would cover me. The second I reached the bottom of the stairs, I saw him. He was standing at the kitchen sink, completely still, facing the faucet. No movement, no sound, no sign he was doing anything. Just standing there. The kitchen was barely lit by the street lamp outside, and shadows covered most of him except his shoulders and part of his face. It looked like he had been standing there for a long time, not making a single sound, not even shifting his weight. The air in the kitchen felt strange, heavy, still, like the whole house was waiting for something to happen. I didn't breathe for a moment because I didn't want him to turn around. It was the kind of silence that makes you feel like making any noise could trigger something you didn't want to deal with. My heartbeat felt too loud in my chest. I filled my glass and walked back to my room calmly, forcing myself not to look back at him. When I got inside, I locked the door immediately. I stared at the lock for a long time, not trusting it, and then I took the small chair from the desk and wedged it under the doorknob. It wasn't the strongest chair, but it made me feel a little safer. I got back in bed fully awake now. It didn't take long before I heard him. Slow, steady steps moved across the hall. They stopped right outside my door. I could hear the faint pressure of his weight on the floorboards, the kind of sound you only notice when you're terrified and paying attention to every tiny noise. He didn't knock. He didn't try the knob. But he stayed there for a long time, standing so close I could picture him holding his breath, listening for movement inside my room. I lay completely still. My eyes were open the whole night. I didn't sleep for even a second. Every few minutes, he would shift his weight slightly like he was adjusting his stance, but he never walked away completely. Sometimes he took a step or two, then came right back. The room felt smaller with every passing hour. My body stayed tense, like if I relaxed even a little, something bad would happen. I kept checking the time. 4 a.m., 5 a.m., 5:30. The steps didn't leave until near 6, and even then, it didn't sound like he walked far. It sounded like he just drifted back toward the kitchen or living room. When the first bit of daylight came through the blinds, I finally moved. I packed my bag fast, stuffing everything inside without caring how wrinkled it got. I didn't shower. I didn't brush my teeth. I just wanted to get out of the house while he was distracted or maybe asleep, though I still wasn't sure he ever actually slept at all. I opened my door slowly. The hallway was empty. The air was cold in the kind of way that felt unnatural for inside a house. I walked down the stairs as quietly as possible. Every sound felt too loud, like it could alert him instantly. My hand shook a little as I grabbed the doorknob. Once outside, I took a deep breath of fresh air. The morning was bright and calm, nothing like the inside of that house. I walked fast to my car, unlocked it, and climbed in. I didn't even look around until I was safely inside with the doors locked. As I backed out of the driveway, I made the mistake of glancing toward the house. In the upstairs window, he stood perfectly still, looking directly at me. His face was blank. No smile this time, no expression at all, just staring like he couldn't understand why I was leaving. His eyes didn't blink. He didn't move. He just watched me pull away like he fully expected me to stop and come back inside at any moment. I drove without stopping for miles. I didn't calm down until I reached a busy road with lots of cars and people. Only then did I feel like I was finally away from whatever had been waiting for me inside that house. Later, Airbnb asked why I checked out early. I typed the safest, most simple thing I could. The place didn't feel right. I didn't mention the footsteps. I didn't mention how he was awake at every hour. I didn't mention the way he stood at the sink at 3 a.m. I didn't mention how I heard him stop outside my door for long stretches of time. I didn't mention the way he stared at me from the window like he expected me to return. I didn't want that man to know I said anything. I didn't want him to come after me. Some people don't need to say a single word to tell you something is wrong with them. I still think about that night sometimes, especially when I stay somewhere unfamiliar. I'll hear a floorboard shift or a hallway creak, and the memory comes back instantly. The worst part isn't anything he did. It's the feeling that he was doing exactly what he wanted to do, watching, waiting, and maybe he had done it to a lot of guests before me, and not all of them got out early. That thought has stayed with me more than anything else from that night. I booked the Airbnb because I needed a place to stay for a quick work trip, and the listing said, private entire lower level. The photos looked plain but clean, and the price was low enough that I didn't question much. The location seemed quiet, and the host had decent reviews. I didn't expect luxury. I just wanted a bed, a desk, and a place to shower. When I arrived, the house looked normal from the outside. A typical suburban home with trimmed bushes and a clean driveway. The host didn't come out to greet me, but he messaged instructions on how to enter the basement from the side door. The concrete steps leading down were cracked at the edges, and the metal railing felt a little loose when I grabbed it. The door itself looked old, with peeling paint and a doorknob that turned too easily. Inside, the space felt colder than it should have been. The air had that dry, dusty smell of a basement no one uses much. The lights were dim, with one ceiling bulb flickering before settling. As soon as I stepped fully inside and closed the door behind me, I realized the place didn't look like the listing at all. The basement looked half-finished, almost abandoned. The walls were partly painted, but the color didn't match in some areas, like someone started the job and never came back to finish it. One corner had plywood leaning against the studs. Another corner had stacks of dusty boxes covered in cobwebs. Old furniture, chairs with ripped fabric, a small dresser with one drawer missing, a wooden table that wobbled, were pushed against the walls like someone shoved them aside quickly instead of storing them properly. The bed wasn't terrible, just old. The sheets smelled like laundry detergent but felt rough and stiff. The carpet had uneven patches where it looked like sections were torn up and replaced. There were parts near the walls where the carpet didn't reach all the way, leaving strips of bare concrete visible underneath. I tried to brush it off, I had stayed in worse places before. I dropped my bag, plugged in my phone, and sat on the edge of the bed. The temperature felt colder near the far wall, where the concrete showed through. A small draft came through a thin window near the ceiling, where I could see grass and the edge of the driveway outside. The first night, I tried to sleep early. I was tired from traveling and wanted to get some rest, but I kept waking up. Not from noise, just from a strange feeling, like someone was staring at me from somewhere in the room. Every time I opened my eyes, the room looked exactly the same. Dim, dusty, motionless. But the feeling lingered, sitting heavy on my chest each time I drifted in and out of sleep. At around 3 a.m., I woke up again, heart beating fast for no clear reason. The air in the room felt still, too still. A faint hum came from the refrigerator in the corner, and the water heater clicked once. I lay there trying to calm down, but I couldn't shake the sense that someone knew I was awake. It sat in my stomach, tightening slowly. When the sun finally came up, light leaked through the small window, and the room felt less threatening. I got up, stretched, and tried to shake off the restless night. I walked around the basement to get a better feel for it. The storage boxes looked untouched for years. The furniture smelled faintly of mildew. The walls had uneven patches where new drywall met old, but none of it looked professionally done. Then something caught my eye. Near the ceiling, close to the small window, there was a tiny hole in the drywall. At first, I thought it was just damage from when someone moved furniture. But when I stepped closer, I noticed the edges of the hole. They weren't chipped. They were too clean. A small circle, maybe the width of a pencil, carved into the wall just below the ceiling line. Not high enough to be random, not low enough to be hidden behind furniture. Right at the height where someone could hide something inside the wall to look down into the room. I grabbed the only chair available, a fragile, old dining chair, and placed it beneath the hole. The chair creaked under my weight, but I climbed carefully and got close enough to examine it. Close, I noticed something else. There was fresh plaster around the hole. Not old, not dusty, not cracked. Fresh, like someone had patched around it recently. My skin crawled. The hole wasn't accidental. Someone made it on purpose. I leaned even closer, squinting into the darkness inside the wall. It was too dark to see anything clearly, so I pulled out my phone, turned on the camera, and tried to zoom in by taking a photo. The flash bounced off something, just a quick reflection, like metal catching the light. I felt a sudden drop in my stomach. Something metallic shouldn't be inside a random hole in the drywall unless it was a nail, a bracket, or a lens. The shape I saw didn't look like a nail. It looked smoother, more rounded, more like the edge of a camera. My hands shook slightly as I lowered the phone. I climbed off the chair slowly, trying not to make noise even though I wasn't sure why that mattered. The basement felt colder now, like the temperature had dropped sharply the moment I realized what I'd seen. I checked my phone again, zooming into the picture I took. The reflection inside the hole was faint but unmistakable. Something metallic was there, something intentional, something that didn't belong inside the wall of a rented basement. A thought sat in my mind, heavy and nauseating. If there was a camera, someone could have been watching everything since the moment I arrived. Every move I made in the room, every moment I slept, every second I changed clothes. The thought made my skin crawl so badly that I felt lightheaded. I didn't confront the host. I didn't message him. I didn't touch the hole again. I didn't know who else had access to the house. I didn't know if anyone was watching from upstairs. I didn't know if someone was recording me live or checking footage later. The idea of accusing the wrong person felt dangerous. The idea of accusing the right person felt even worse. My priority was to leave without making noise, without causing attention, without letting anyone know that I knew. I packed my bag in under 2 minutes. I grabbed everything I brought, double-checked the corners of the room to make sure I wasn't leaving anything behind, and kept my eyes away from the hole as I moved around. The whole time, I felt the same feeling I had during the night, that heavy sensation of eyes on me, like someone was still watching through the wall. When everything was packed, I walked calmly toward the door, though my heart was pounding so hard it felt like it echoed inside my chest. I turned the lock as quietly as I could, stepped outside into the cold morning air, and closed the side door behind me. The house was silent. No movement from upstairs. No shadows crossing the windows. Nothing that confirmed my fear, but nothing that eased it either. I walked down the driveway quickly, pretending everything was normal in case anyone inside was watching. When I got to my car, I unlocked it, got in, and drove away without looking back at the house. When Airbnb asked why I checked out early, I didn't mention the hole. I didn't mention the metal reflection. I didn't mention the feeling of being watched all night. I simply wrote that the place didn't feel right. I didn't want to accuse someone without proof. I didn't want to start something if the wrong person saw it. I didn't want to put myself in danger by pointing at a hidden camera that someone clearly didn't want guests to notice. But the thing that stays with me the most isn't the hole itself. It's the breathing I thought I imagined the first night. It's the feeling of eyes on me in the dark. It's the cold air that never warmed up, even when the heat kicked on. And it's the thought that still crosses my mind sometimes, late at night, when everything is quiet. If there was a camera in that wall, then someone somewhere in that house was watching everything I did. And I'll never know how much they saw.